Hello, everybody. Um, yeah, the Coast to Coast is one of the most iconic and beautiful walks that you can do in the British Isles and perhaps in the world. Um, and uh, and I'd like to talk a little bit about it. It's quite a long walk. It's 190 miles or so, just over that, in fact, 193. And probably by the time you've done the walk, it will be over 200 miles. So, because you've got to walk to hotels and walk around villages and towns and things. So coast to coast is the basic concept. It's you put your foot in the sea at one end and you go across the hills and mountains and put your foot in the sea at the other end, maybe carry a pebble with you at the beginning and dump it in the sea at the other end. A lot of people do that. And this is the original coast to coast. There's various coast to coasts in the world and people have designed their own ones, but this is the famous one. Um, and it was designed by a guy called Alfred Wainwright. Just use a slide here. So Wainwright was born in 1907, died 1991, and he probably had Asperger's syndrome. He was incredibly intense in terms of detail and concentration, very good at school, but he left the school at 13 and became an office boy at a Blackburn engineer's office. But when he was young, he did walking and he drew maps and things. And then in 1930, he did a walk with his cousin to from Windermere. They got trained to Windermere, and they went up to Orist Head, which is the viewpoint over Lake Windermere to the hills. And he was amazed by what he saw, and he started drawing pictures of the peaks. You can see here there's a this is a beautiful view looking towards the Lakeland Hills. And he did his cartoons as well. So he did both detailed drawings, rather like photographs, and these beautiful cartoons. And so he had a sense of humor. He was very antisocial though, and he liked being on his own really, or just walking with maybe a couple of friends only. And people said he was a bit curmudgeonly, but he did these beautiful guidebooks. And basically, he started doing them for himself, and then in 1955, he self-published the first of a series of 7 books, pictorial guides to the Lakeland Fowls, and they went from 1955 to 1965, and then he started doing other books as well, like a Pennine Explorer, and then a companion to the Pennine Way, and then his experiences walking on the Pennine Way that decided him to make his own route across across Britain, which he thought would be a lot prettier than the Pennine Way, because he had some bad experiences on that. So he came up with the idea of the coast to coast, which basically linked up the Lake District with 2 other national parks, Yorkshire Dales and North York Moors, in one sort of spectacular walk, whereas the Pennine Way just basically stays with the Pennines and doesn't visit the lakes or the North York Moors at all. So Alfred Wainwright, he sort of labored over this book for about 2 or 3 years, started the research in 1971, and in 1973, he came out with this book here, which is the Coast to Coast Walk. It's changed slightly over the years as some of the routes were kind of permissive and some of them were across farmland. But generally, you can still get a modern copy of the book with similar or the same illustrations on it. It's a very good souvenir if you ever do decide to do the walk. It's a beautiful souvenir. Um, on the walk, you can see really beautiful things. There's sheep, whole varieties of sheep, from Herdwicks to rare varieties like these shaggy ones here. And you've got steam engines around Gromont. You've got Black Sail Hut, where you can have a good picnic lunch. There's beautiful lakeland scenery, these tarns like Angle Tarn here, Keld Lodge here. You can have pub breaks and stuff like that. And great B&Bs. This one here in Richmond, you get views over the town, and then walking in the Wainstones and other pubs and things for evening meals. It's a beautiful walk. Has a lot of different villages and towns and good overnight stops for you to rest and recoup and refresh. Now, his original concept He didn't quite draw a line across the country exactly, but you can see it zigzags, the route zigzags across. But it takes in a lot of the beautiful valleys and areas of the Lake District, and then it crosses into the Yorkshire Dales here, over the Pennines, which are part of the Yorkshire Dales, and across the Vale of Mowbray, and up into the North York Moors. So those are the three national parks. It starts in St Bees there and finishes in Robin Hood's Bay. So you get to St Bees to start the walk, and basically roll off over the cliffs, and you get beautiful views across the Irish Sea. So you can see the Isle of Man, you can see southern Scotland, and especially between April and July, there's birds nesting on the cliffs. Sometimes black guillemots, and certainly ordinary guillemots are there. I haven't seen any puffins, although occasionally they might be there because of the availability of sand eels, but there's loads of other birds as well. Beautiful walk, goes around the headland. You almost go back on yourself towards St Bees, then you go off towards Cleater, and then over your first fell of the day, which is called Dent Fell, a couple of 100 meters over there, drop down to a valley called Nannycatch, and there's a slight ascent, and then down to Ennerdale Bridge, and for the first night. So most people stay usually in a B&B or a pub in Ennerdale Bridge to start with. And then next day is quite a long day, as you can see, Ennerdale Bridge to Borrowdale. This is quite a tough day, and if you've recovered from your first day, you've got quite a long way to go that day. It goes along Ennerdale Water. There's some bit of scrambling around Angler's Crag, which is by the water, and then along the side of the lake, where you've got some nice sort of old oak trees and hawthorns and things, and then you come up the other side and you follow the River Lisa through forest, which is being sort of grown back for it rewilders, as it were, by these days, and you end up at a place called Blacksail Hut, which is a very small youth hostel where normally you get there at lunchtime. And then from lunchtime, you go over the Loftbeck, over the high hills, and then drop down to the Honister slate mines, which have been mined since Roman times. From Honister, it's down into Borrowdale, which was probably, and I think I've read that it's Wainwright's favourite part of the Lake District. So it's a really beautiful area. No lake in Borrowdale, but fast streams and beautiful crags, like Eagle Crag in Stonethwaite. Okay, and there's several places where people stay, and a few pubs dotted around. And just very, very, very pleasant ambience. From Borrowdale, generally fairly short day up and over to Grasmere. There is an option to extend it slightly with a walk up Helm Crag, but a lot of people go over, do the standard route if the weather's not quite so good. The route's been improved over the years. There's some new flagstones put up over across the boggy moorlands where people used to have trouble navigating in bad visibility. The descent towards Grasmere is quite eroded still, but they've been trying to improve the footpaths over the years. Beautiful views if you get nice weather, and views back towards Borrowdale into Grasmere. If you take the Helm Crag option, you get views over the Lake of Grasmere as well, which is really beautiful. So lovely walking, quite steep up and down, as most days. So most days the trend is that you leave your hotel, you have a climb up, and then you descend to the village or the town with your accommodation. Some have a double climb, or even a multiple kind of undulation climb, but the theme is more or less the same. So Borrowdale to Grasmere, and then Grasmere is a beautiful place. Lots of tourists. It's where William Wordsworth has his grave and his house. It's a nice church there, gingerbread shop. And then from there, you walk to Patterdale Glenridding. Patterdale was the original destination, but there's limited accommodation there. Most people now stay in Glenridding. That's a beautiful day with free options, depending on the weather and how fit you feel and your confidence. So the general General day is a climb up to Grisdale Tarn, then down the other side straight into between Patterdale and Glenridding, where you turn off. And the second option, which is probably the more popular one in good weather, is to climb St Sunday Crag. Now, if you do that, that's another couple of 100 meters up, and you get the most fantastic views over Ullswater, like you can see behind me on this my background here. That's the view coming down into Patterdale from St Sunday Crag, which is beautiful. And then there's the harder option, which fewer people do because you require a lot of stamina and good weather, and that's to climb over Helvellyn and then down Striding Edge, which is quite exposed, especially if it's windy, but some people would probably really enjoy that. That would probably take a couple of hours longer than the standard route down into the valley. Down in Glenridding, if you've taken the shorter route, you may have time to take one of the old steamers out onto Ullswater for a late afternoon sort of sail up and down. And that's some people do that, and it's quite enjoyable. Otherwise, there's pubs and tea shops and gear shops if you need to get some new stuff and restock up with supplies. And next day is a really tough day. This is Glenridding to Shap, and you can see it's 26k or 16 miles, and it's a full day's walk. And this one is a big climb up from Patterdale, so you walk back to Patterdale from Glenridding, and a steep up to Angle Tarn, and then a gradual steep up over to Kidsley Pike, which is um, it's the high point of the coast to coast at 780 meters or 2,559 feet. And it's the high point, unless, of course, you've done either Helvellyn or St Sunday Crag, which are higher than that. But for most people, it is the high point of the coast to coast. From there, it's a long and quite arduous descent down to Haweswater, which is another long sort of freshwater lake for water supply. And then it's kind of quite a gnarly walk out from the side of Haweswater, and then across beautiful rolling farmland to Shap Abbey, which has remains which are of course disillusioned by Henry VIII back in the 1538. But the remains give you some idea of the grandeur of that abbey back in the 11, 12, 1300s. Okay, then it's about another mile on the road and takes you to the little old market town of Shap, which was the main thoroughfare before they built the motorway nearby, which kind of bypassed Shap. But this is where most of the accommodations and pubs in this area are. It's quite so remote, high in the Pennines. In the winter, it gets snowed out quite regularly, but it's quite an interesting place to be. From Shap on the standard route, you have a very long day to Kirkby Stevens. Now, most of our trips, if they're more than the standard trip, which is based originally on the Wainwright itinerary, which was actually 12 walking days, we do 13 walking days on our basic classic itinerary. They would split this day in half, so you can, if you want shorter walks, then see the other itineraries we split this up. But the Shap to Kirkby Stevens route is a beautiful undulating moorland walk, and that basically takes you past some couple of stone circles. There's these big erratic boulders which are carried by the ice in the glacial period, and you bypass Orton. Some people take a detour to Orton to visit the chocolate factory, and that takes about another hour or so, or hour and a half, depending if they stay for a coffee. And then they go towards Smaردale. Smaردale has a nice stone bridge and the river there. And then there's a little climb up over Smaردale Fell, then down to the market town of Kirkby Stevens, which is attractive, has attractive streets, and it's called Wines, which are narrow to stop the Scottish reivers from invading town and attacking everyone too easily, as it were. Kirkby Stevens is the second biggest town on the route after Richmond, and has a few shops and cafes and pubs. Okay, so Kirkby Stevens to Keld, you have a big steep climb. It's quite a full day, but quite a pretty day. And out of Kirkby Stevens, it's about a 500-meter climb up on top of the moors, and you get to 9 Standards Rig, which is this area of cairns, or 9 kind of posts of made of stones, which go back to hundreds of years. They have been restored and rebuilt, but they appeared in maps back in the 1600s. So they do. They have been there for a long time, and they don't know how long exactly they have been there. But they basically mark a boundary nowadays between Cumbria and Yorkshire, and they also mark the boundary between the watershed of England, the rivers which run off the Pennines to west from there go into the Irish Sea, and those running off the Pennines from the east of there go into the North Sea. So it's a major watershed on the route, as it were. And you go over there, and there's quite boggy terrain. Some of it has been improved now with some flagstones over certain sections, but you're basically descending down plus a little hamlet called Raven Seat, and then along the side of the upper river swell, which is very pretty at certain times of year, to the tiny little village of Keld, which has very limited accommodation. There's a couple of B&Bs, and there's a kind of a pub hotel place there, very Keld Lodge, which is really lovely, and it's just a sort of a very fine place to be. Nice summer's night, you get the sound of curlew and birds singing, and it's just beautiful. And it's very quiet, at least in the evenings, once the tourists have gone from the main roads and stuff like that. But I love the iconic area on the route to visit. And this is the start of the lead mining area. So Keld, although it was agricultural, and it still is agricultural, it was built up in the early 1800s from the lead mining industry. So you've got little chapels there, Wesleyan and Methodist chapels, and lead miners, small lead miners' houses. Keld, incidentally, means spring in the Old Norse. So it was originally settled by the Vikings, they think. Okay, so Keld, just after Keld, as you leave Keld, you basically cross over the Swale River, and that's the halfway point of the whole coast to coast. And that day you're going to Reeth. This viewpoint on the right here is the upper Swale, one of the iconic viewpoints of the coast to coast. At this point, really, the trail split. So you got an upland and a lowland choice that day. So it depends on how you feel, what you want to see, and what the weather's like. So the upland section goes up through the lead mines, and it's quite barren and bleak, but has quite interesting views. And if you're into industrial archaeology, it's quite a nice walk to do. And you drop down then into Reeth for your night, which is an old lead mining village around the green. More and more people probably these days do the lowlands section because it is more beautiful and it's more sheltered in bad weather, or if the winds are strong and cold, etc. And there's a couple of places en route where you can go to. You could possibly go to a pub or a cafe. That's the choice that day. They both end up, and they're both about the same length. Both end up in Reeth. A beautiful village on the green, as I said, surrounded by pubs, which originally serviced the lead miners used to go there and drink and brawl, and the pubs relieved them of their hard-earned wages. Today, the publicans also relieve us of our hard-earned wages because they have a good selection of beers and food that you can have in the evening. There's nice tea shops there, a couple of basic shops as well. So, Reeth to Richmond. This is probably the easiest day on the usual route. So on the standard classic route, the Reeth to Richmond day, basically roll out of Reeth and then follow the swell, climb above the swell at a place called Marrick Priory on the up Steps Wood. The steps they think were built there by the nuns, but years ago, back in the medieval time, before King Henry VIII got to them. And then through Marrick Village, and then drop through undulating and rise up through undulating countryside through a tiny village called Mask, and then drop out of some woods, and you'll see Richmond Keep, which you can see here on the right, which would be below you, and drop into Richmond. It's usually, for most people, fairly shortish day. Some people are there by about 1:30, 2 o'clock. So you've got plenty of time to look around Richmond, maybe visit the keep if you want to, or go down and see the waterfalls. There's a series of step waterfalls called Richmond Falls, which at certain times of the year, especially when after a deluge of rain, are quite impressive, quite beautiful. Okay, Richmond to Osmotherley is the longest day on the classic coast to coast walk, 24 miles, 39k, but it's not hard. There's quite a bit of road walking. Um, there's basically a couple of undulations, but nothing too much until the end, where you come to a steep climb up to Osmotherley. Now, Osmotherley is actually about a mile off the coast to coast route. It's on the Cleveland Way, but because it's a pretty village and there's more accommodation there than the other village nearby, which is Ingleby Cross, our groups and our individuals tend to stay in Osmotherley. But you can go through Ingleby Cross as well on the way. So it's a fairly kind of pedestrian day. Can be tiring after hot weather. There's a couple of places and churches en route where they have honesty boxes and you can get drinks from the churches. Um, and it's nice, very agricultural area and stuff like that. Osmotherley, very pretty village, was involved with the flax industry, so not lead mining, but flax making. And there was there was little dams which powered flax looms, and some of the cottages there were for the flax workers back in the day. Um, Several churches, fish and chip shops, and 3 pubs and a cafe. Osmotherley to Blakey, this is quite a long day. This is probably the second hardest day of the whole classic coast to coast. A lot of our other um, other coast to coast walks split this at a place called Claybank Top. But if you're doing the whole route, it's quite a tough day, undulating along the Cleveland Way, which coincides with the coast to coast, and that undulates along. And then you pass a cafe called Lord Stone's at about 12 o'clock, which means you can have either a late coffee break or an early lunch there, and then carry on up and down over the Cleveland Hills until you get to Claybank Top, which is basically a road pass, and then um, continue on to Blakey, which is about another 9 miles. As I say, the longer trips, they have a break and leave at Claybank Top and go to Great Brelton, where the accommodation is. They split the long day in two. Okay, but the classic route, you do the whole thing over. So Blakey is a very high mountain inn, which has been going in some form or another since the 1500s or so, as a kind of like a pub inn, and it's very, very beautiful, very remote area. It's just nice to be there. It's quite busy. It's very popular with day trippers, not just walkers, but people driving through to the North York Moors. Um, and it does very good food, has about 12 different real ales on, has very nice snug accommodations, very nice place to be if it's cold and wet and windy outside. You feel very snug inside. It's like a cave. From Blakey, after breakfast, you drop down towards the River Esk Valley, and basically it's largely descending through the moors. There's some little bit of ascent, but it's largely descending. Great views over Glaisdale and Great Fryupdale, and then drop down to Glaisdale, where they used to smelt iron ore. And from Glaisdale, where there's a pub, we join there's the Beggars Bridge. We can see these people here. And that dates back to the 1600s, and there's a romantic story connected to that, which goes back to history. And then from the Beggars Bridge, basically follow the River Esk on the undulating footpath by the riverside to Egton Bridge. Egton Bridge has a couple of pubs, very nice houses, a few B&Bs, and it's quite famous for fly fishing, and has these stepping stones to get over the river. Which is really nice to do if you've got a bit of not head for heights, but you don't mind you can judge your distances fairly well stepping over the stepping stones. It depends on the water levels as well, whether you engage in doing that at all. And some people that day might be staying in Gromont, which is the next village along, which is about another mile and a half along, if Egton Bridge is booked out. But Gromont has a few accommodations as well. For next day, Egton Bridge to Robin Hood's Bay, or Gromont, if you've gone all the way to Gromont instead of Egton Bridge, is quite a long day, and people do get a bit kind of, I think the word is, I don't know, they're kind of anticipating the end and looking forward to the end of the trip, and the day is quite a long one, and they may not anticipate the fact they might get in at 4:30, 5 o'clock, or 5:30, depending on how fast they walk. There's some nice attractions on the way. There's some big climbs up out of Gromont. So Gromont means big hill, and you climb out of Gromont on a big hill, which is a very, very steep tarmac road up into Slatesmoor, crossing Slatesmoor, then down to Millbeck, which is this beautiful woodland walk along by the Millbeck River. And there's a waterfall called the Falling Foss, which is about 30 meters high. So, and it's really, really beautiful. After a lot of rain, there's Midge Hall next door to Falling Foss, where you can get a really nice cream tea. Very nice to have a rest there about 11:30. Following on from the Millbeck, you walk out the other side, then there's a steep climb up on the road, then across 2 sections of moor, and then down to a place called High Hawksor Village, a bit of road walking until you drop down by the caravan sites to the coast, and then you wind round on the coast back on the Cleveland Way, and you end up walking towards Robin Hood's Bay, which you don't see really until the last mile and a half or so before you actually get to the village, and then you drop down the top part of the bay into Baytown, which is the lower part, and you throw your stone into the sea, and that's basically the end of the route. Most people would probably have a beer at the Bay Hotel, which is right on the coast. And there's the Wainwright Bar there, named after that eponymous man, and they can sign the book if you want to sign the book, but it's fairly busy down there. A very beautiful area. I certainly suggest, if you've got time, exploring Robin Hood's Bay the following morning, if you're sober enough, when there's hardly anyone around, and it's just really beautiful. Just a lovely place to be here. The seagulls rolling around in the sky. So that's the basic route. That's the classic route I've basically gone through. So you can see here we've got coast to coast tour options, and so the full route can be split in different ways. So you've got different days. We've got the 15, 16, 17 and 18 day variants. The 15-day is the classic route. So the only difference between that and the original Wainwright route is that they stay in Grasmere. So Wainwright originally, he walked all the way from Borrowdale all the way to Patterdale in one day, which is quite a long, it's about 17-mile day. So he did that one day. We split that with the Grasmere overnight because most people enjoy that, and that makes it less tiring, and you've only got one big climb on both those days. Okay, the 16-day basically just splits the Shap Kirkby Stevens day, so you can stay in autumn there, and then the 17 and 18-day variations do that, or they split the long day between Richmond and Osmotherley, with a stay in a place called Danby Wisk, which is a small hamlet, and also they stay at Claybank Top and split that day. So they split the day going to the pub at Blakey as well. So these are the full options. 18-day is our best-selling trip at the moment. It gives you quite a lot of time to look round, gather yourself, and enjoy the route and not feel you're too rushed. Some of the harder days, like for example, between going over to Borrowdale, they remain the same. They're not shortened by that at all. And then these sections, basically you can do half the coast to coast. You can either do a St. Bees to Kirkby Stevens, or Kirkby Stevens to Robin Hood's Bay. So you could do perhaps one year and one the other year, or maybe both the same year, depending on what you want to do, seeing it at different seasons. And again, you can do that as the sort of classic itinerary, or splitting up with longer days bit like on the full route. We also do the guided walks, which are very popular, and they're sold as a 15 or a 17-day option. So you can decide whether you want to do the classic one or slightly extended version. Okay, and so the highlights you got there, that's a kind of distilled version, and that basically is a 12-day trip, and that basically misses out a lot of the longer and the harder days. You still got a couple of hard days on that one, but you see in the itinerary that you have some transfers involved, and which are included, and these allow you to basically just walk on some of the easier sections and miss out some of what people would say were probably the more boring sections of the walk. Although you do miss out some of the classic Cleveland Hill sections and bits and pieces like that. Okay, so those are the options you've got. They're all demonstrated on the website, on the Walks Britain website. You'll be able to see, get the printout of the trip notes if you want to, and compare and contrast them. Okay, so getting there, it's reasonably straightforward. So you've got to get to St Bees at the beginning, and there's a train station. There never used to be Sunday trains, but there's Sunday trains nowadays. And basically from London, you're talking about a 5.5 hour train journey up via either Lancaster or Carlisle, where you have to change. Probably Lancaster is the prettier way to go if you're coming from the south. That you basically the coastal route of the train round Silverdale from Lancaster and along the coast is slightly prettier than the one up via Carlisle, but they're both pretty nice. People coming from Manchester probably go to Carlisle, and that takes about 3.5 hours or so. And actually from Glasgow, you can get a train about 2.5 hours to St Bees. So Glasgow actually is quite convenient. Obviously, from Glasgow Airport, you have to get a bus into the centre of town because there's no train station at the airport. Whereas Manchester Airport has a train station. So let's say it might take a bit more time with the bus. I don't know, but they're quite efficient. Quite efficient routes. At the end of Robin Hood's Bay, most people will take a bus or a taxi to Scarborough train station. From Scarborough train station, you take a train to York, which is about hourly really. And for onward travel, both north and south, you can go up to Scotland or back down to London on those, or you can go across the country back to Manchester Airport. So there's quite a lot of options there, quite a good scope. And the bus from Robin Hood's Bay to Scarborough between 1 and 2 an hour, depending on the time of year and the day, etc. Okay, car parking is, if you're driving, car parking is possible at Kirkby Stevens, and there's a kind of reserved car park there which you can pay for, and there's various transfers which the website will talk about. Okay, so that's if you're interested in driving there. Service along the way. So basically these days everything is on the app here. We use the Gaibo app, and that gives you navigational operation. So you basically follow a blue dot along the route. If you go off route by more than 50 meters, it will beep at you and tell you you're going wrong. So it's really hard in bad weather to go too far wrong, and you just follow the dot on the route. Obviously, you need to carry with you. You need to have a power pack just in case. You need to remember to charge your phone every night, and make sure you go out with a full charge, and make sure perhaps you've got a water resistant case. I know a lot of these phones now are pretty water resistant, but being very careful in bad weather, for example. Sometimes it might be worth having a case with a hand loop just in case stop you dropping the phone. With the Gaibo app, there's you have 4 downloads, so you can have up to 4 devices on the booking running on the so you can have more than one device running on the trip if you want to. So you can have a phone or an iPad, or your partner could have their phone as well. So yeah, it's a useful thing, and most people are using this system these days. It show variants where the accommodations are, and it's quite simple to use. Luggage transfers, daily luggage transfers. There's a baggage limit of 18 kilograms, which is quite religiously enforced. It's basically to protect the drivers from carrying too much weight and hurting their backs, because they have to shift tons of bags every week. And so 18 kilograms has been decided for that. And that's for one bag. They say do not tie any uh, extra bags to the one bag, or leave poles connected to the bags, or boots, because they might go missing. There's lots of bags go into the holes of these vans, which go apply across the country, and so just suitcases are ideal, really solid suitcases. um, yeah, and if you do have an overweight bag, then they will request that you either have organize a separate bag, or and pay extra for that. Okay, so that it gets carried. The accommodation on the route is handpicked, and it's chosen because the proprietors there are very handy for walkers and very friendly for walkers. There's lots of B&Bs, and very, very pleasant. Some of them have been doing it for years. Um, and we have very good relationships with a lot of B&B owners. Obviously, some B&Bs do change over time, especially after COVID and people retire, but a lot of the places remain the same. And we use inns, pubs, guest houses, and small hotels, as well as the B&Bs. So always a comfortable night. The facilities vary a bit en route, and of course the availability of accommodations at busy times, it means we might have to choose other ones which may be slightly out of the village, which may require a transfer, that depends on the time of booking and what is available at the time. But most of them you just walk to, and are very, very nice. Okay. Emergency support, so 24/7 local support from our team that lives along the route. Um, and we have a helpline and numbers if you have any difficulty in whatever way, with accommodation, or with the app, or any luggage transfer difficulties at all. So so on to training. Well, the coast to coast, it is and it is not a tough walk. It depends what you're used to. That's the thing. If we recommend that you train up for the route, so basically cardiovascular training, perhaps start training about 3 months before the walk, and try and walk on the kind of the terrain that the coast to coast is. So it's grassy paths, it's little roads, it's forest tracks, and it's also stony routes like this. This guy's walking across a hushing. This is in the lead mining area of the Pennines. And you can see it's quite rough underfoot. It's quite steep as well. So he's using poles, and you've got to be prepared for uneven ground and rocky ground, and some loose stones as well. There's hardly any scrambling involved on the coast to coast. There's some hand to rock around Angled Crag and Robin Hood Seat around around the Endale Water, and there's a bit around the Wain Stones, but you don't really need to touch too much rock on this walk. But you do need to be aware of your footfalls and your where you're putting your foot, especially in wet weather and if it's windy. So we recommend that you practice. If you can do a few multi-day weekends before doing the coast to coast, then we'd also recommend that as well. Okay, so food and drink on the way. There's quite a lot, lot to choose from. You might be confused by the photograph on the left there. That's not in Paris. That's actually one of the restaurants in Richmond, but that's a French restaurant, and there's quite a lot of diverse food on the route, from pubs to fish and chip shops, from Indians to Chinese takeaways, cafes, and some people just sometimes decide just to go to a little supermarket or corner shop and get something and nibble on that. So it depends on how their energy levels are and how tired they are at the end of the day. But most of the options will be pubs. The bigger towns like Richmond and Kirkby Stevens, they do have other restaurants too, which you can visit. But pub food has come a long way in England in the last few years, and there's a good variety of food, including vegetarian and vegan options in most of them, and also typical pub classics as well, and some local classics like Cumberland sausage, which is a Cumbrian speciality. So there's quite a lot to choose from there. So now, realistically, you've got to take gear for good and bad weather. As you can see from the selection of photographs, you've got someone grimacing in bad weather. You get quite a bit of rain on the coast to coast, it's possible, and then you get quite strong periods of sunlight and stable weather as well, where you get really hot conditions. So you need to be prepared, especially in the summer walking, for all kinds of conditions. So I've noticed some people over the years, they've carried ponchos. Ponchos don't really work very well in really strong winds because you become like a sail and get blown over and down the hill. So we recommend a good quality waterproof top, waterproof or water resistant trousers, and a rucksack cover to cover your backpack. Some people have gaiters. Some people don't worry about gaiters. I don't bother with gaiters anymore, but most people end up with wet feet on a few days, especially if it has been boggy. But don't think it's going to rain all the time or any of the time. I've had 2 of the trips I've done, I haven't seen any rain whatsoever. On several others, it's hardly rained at all. On others, it has been wet, and others, it's been about half and half. So it's a question of being realistic and just having things ready in the worst case scenario. So hopefully you'll get really good weather during the during the times of year that we do this trip. It tends to be reasonably stable. We had a couple of wet springs this last couple of years, and of course things do change with global warming, but hopefully you have nice weather on this route. So the idea is just to carry good gear, good quality gear, and be prepared for the worst, as it were. Just like to say thank you for listening to me. The Coast to Coast last year became a national trail, one of the 15 actually in England and Wales at the moment. There's a few more in Scotland, and the sign posting will improve over the years. I don't know whether they will put new waymarks up on actually in crossing the Lake District, but certainly in the valleys there's new signage going up, and it's a beautiful walk to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for that. We still have some time to go over some questions, and I've been monitoring some questions while John was talking. So there's the first question comes from Laurie, and she likes to know how many beers you've had over your 26 journeys.
Okay, 26 times. I don't know. It's quite a lot. And lots of variety of beer too. The question is being careful when you come into a settlement after the walk. It's just so nice having a pint of a beer. Then the first one goes down very quickly, and then you tend to have a couple more of your dinner later on, and that's usually enough because you're quite tired in the evenings as well. But it's very refreshing. The first one is always probably the best pint, actually. Yeah.
And maybe the most well-deserved.
Yes, yeah.
There's also some questions about footwear. Whether you recommend hiking boots or trail runners, whether it needs to be waterproof. So can you say something a bit more about that?
So this is a good question, of course. The most important thing is to have a good hiking sole, so it's not worn out. So you've got good grip. There's some very some steep PT areas, and you don't want to slip and over hyperextend your joints or your tendons or anything like that. Some people use trail running shoes. It depends on what you're used to. If you're used to trail running or walking with trail running shoes with a low cut ankle, um, then yeah, okay, that's fine. We recommend having an ankle support with our shoes. So like a boot with some support, a, um, a Vibram sole doesn't have to be stiff, but half stiff or slightly stiffened to give you some support is recommended, and a cushion sole, so that so that if you're on the roads, you have less fatigue on your feet. So some people take a pair of trainers for road sections and carry their boots to the road sections, then move on to their boots or put their boots on when they get to the cross country sections. In terms of waterproofness, uh, most people do get wet feet, even if they have waterproof shoes, boots, because at the end of the day, if it rains a lot, it just runs down your socks. Even with waterproof trousers, it tends to get down your socks and into your boots. Then they take ages to dry out. So in some ways, having free draining shoes, which dry out quickly, like trail running shoes, for example, or cross-country running shoes, is a good idea because they free drain and they dry out quite quickly. Leather walking boots and fabric walking boots take quite a long time to dry out. But it's up to you. If you know you need good ankle support, then we would recommend boots. But you should really have cushion soles so that you can err off fatigue as you walk. Yeah.
Okay. There's some questions about food and drinking as well. So whether people would have to bring water purification filters, where to get food for the
Okay.
lunches, and maybe also a little bit more about toilet facilities along the
Okay. Right. So starting off with water, all the water from taps on the route, unless they say otherwise, because sometimes there might be some local incident with the mains, is drinkable. So you don't have to um, bring filters or buy water bottles. Some people do, of course. If you're worried about it, then you can bring if you've got a small filter or one of those filter bottles you can get now with a carbon filter. You can actually fill that from the tap directly. You don't have to pay out, and we're trying to limit plastic bottles usage as much as possible. So use the tap water. It seems perfectly fine. That's all right. In terms of food on the way, yeah, so most people will get a packed lunch from their accommodation in the morning if they want a lunch. These vary in size somewhat. They tend to be things like sandwiches, bit of cake, um, maybe a carton of orange juice, maybe a chocolate bar, a bit of fruit. That's the standard. Some do more elaborate things than that, and they tend to vary from about £6 to about £10. So you've got to kind of budget that into your finances if you're going to do if you want to pack lunch. Now, some people start having packed lunches and they get tired of it and they just get from shops. Now you can't always get to a shop on the coast to coast, because some places, for example, um, do not have a shop you can get stuff from. But probably about half the places or more do have somewhere where you can get snacks from and supplies. Some places, like I was saying about Milfoss area, on the last day, you can about 11 o'clock you get in there and you can have a cream tea or even a bigger meal if you wanted. So you could actually have stuff on the way. And other places, there's very few places where you'd actually stop for a lunch stop. There's Lord Stone's Cafe in the Cleveland Hills, which ideally falls for an early lunch, so you get there for an early lunchtime. But certainly when you're crossing the Lake District and then mostly on the Pennines, there's nowhere that you're going to have a stop for a lunch or a dinner apart from a picnic. When you go over the day to Borrowdale, there's Honister Slate Mines has a cafe, but that's towards the end of the day, so most people stop there for a coffee or tea. Um, Meals in the evenings, yeah, you're talking about the pubs or restaurants, as I said earlier. Some of them in bottleneck areas where there's very few places, will need pre-booking. So we give advice about actually with the gear, with the stuff we send to you on the PDF about what days those would be and where to ring up. So it'll be up to you probably to ring a day in advance to book a table if you want to. Some people don't necessarily want to go to that restaurant or whatever. So you know, there's various places you can go to, and some might involve a bit of a walk, extra walk from your accommodation.
Cool. That's very helpful, John. Thank you.
Okay.
Glenn has walked Hadrian's Wall in the summer from west to east and is wondering how it compares to the coast to coast.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Hadrian's Wall generally is a lot easier than the coast to coast. It's more straightforward, and you're never too far away from villages or towns on that route. It's got some beautiful areas of walking, and of course you've got the close history with Hadrian's Wall and close walking to the Hadrian's Wall as well. But you don't really get the remoteness that you would get on sections off the coast to coast. So whereas I say coast to coast is hill and mountain walking, Hadrian's Wall is kind of basically hill walking and farmland walking. But a lot of variety on that route as well, and a lot of history, lots of museums to see on the way. And if you're interested in Roman history, lots of interesting things to see.
Good. Carol would like to know the best month or the best time of the year to do the walk, please.
Okay. So it does vary a lot. As I said, this spring we had a very wet spring, and I think last spring as well was quite wet as well. But over the years, the sunniest months have been sort of May to mid-June. The warmest months are July and August. But the rainfall does tend to go up a bit in August, and then it goes up more also in September and October, although September and October can be beautiful golden months as well and golden days. But traditionally, yeah, the May and June are good. April is also quite low, comparatively low in rainfall. Wildflowers are great in May, so some people like that time. There's a kind of freshness about it. August obviously can be quite busy because all the school kids are off on holiday, and July also is fairly busy with walkers. June can be busy. So yeah, it varies a lot, but you can never quite say what the best month will be. If you go in so in August, you get the beautiful heather across the North York moors, especially, which it can be really beautiful. So varies again. The timing of the heather does vary a bit, but when that's all out, it's really, really beautiful.
Yeah. Question from Maria on the start time on the day, and she would like to start as early as possible. Can you give some advice on that?
Yeah, okay, so starting early, it's really up to you. Most the B&Bs have a set time for breakfast. This involves staffing levels and actually getting up and putting on ovens and all the rest of it. They will not necessarily be able to do a very early breakfast. So if you're thinking about leaving at say 7, they are unlikely to be able to do a 6:30 breakfast. Some might be able to provide something out on the side for you. That may be possible, but you really have to negotiate with the B&B owner because they have their own house rules. And certainly in some of the pub hotels, there's no one on staff until say 8 in the morning. So it's very difficult to leave too early. Most people end up leaving between 8:30 and 9:30 most days.
Okay, I think we're down to the last questions, and I'm going to combine two if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Laundry facilities at the hotels and what to do with excess luggage.
Okay.
So excess luggage can be sent ahead. You have to pay extra for that, but what happens with that is it gets sent to Kirkby Stevens, where the depot is for the pack horse Shap van baggage movement, and they keep your bag there for a fee for the period that you're walking, and then on your last day that's sent to your last accommodation, and so you re-rendezvous with that, and you can, and that's it. So that's quite straightforward. So that's put into, as I say, put into storage, and then washing things. Okay. Now, a lot of B&Bs don't want you to wash in the showers or in the rooms or whatever because it's muddy, etc. A lot of B&Bs will do a load for £7 to £10, something like that, if they got the time, and if they offering that service. Some won't offer the service, of course, and in that sense, it's probably best to combine loads. I'd recommend, what I usually do is I just wash smalls and things in the rooms, and they usually dry overnight. The fast growing drying t-shirts dry overnight too, and if you wear like merino tops, you get some merino, lightweight merino tops, they don't smell. You can wear those for about 4 days without them smelling too much. They take a bit longer to dry out when you wash them, but they're quite nice to use as well. Oh yeah, so there is a commercial laundry in Kirkby Stevens, but it's whether you get in on time, depending on your walk, whether you come from Orton or whether you come from Shap, whether you get in time to actually be able to use that. So I'd say, don't, you can wear stuff for a few days normally, or a couple of days, without having to wash it, but that's up to you and how you feel about it. Yeah, that's kind of a question you have to have with your landlord or landlady. Pubs, generally, if you're staying in a pub, you won't be able to do that. So yeah, okay.
Thank you very much, John. It's time to finish up, unfortunately. Time passed by very quickly. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.